When you think of Caitlin Clark, you picture her pulling up from the logo, dropping dimes in traffic, and firing up an arena full of Indiana Fever fans. You probably don't picture her in a blazer walking into a courtroom with a briefcase in hand, ready to argue a case. But according to her own teammate Aliyah Boston, that might not be such a crazy image after all. What started as a light, playful conversation on a podcast has turned into one of the most accurate compliments you can give Caitlin Clark. She doesn't just play basketball at a high level, she thinks the game like a lawyer building a case. And the way Boston described it says a lot about how intelligent, prepared, and sharp Clark really is. Right now, it's almost impossible to imagine Caitlin Clark doing anything besides running a WNBA offense and changing the trajectory of the league at just 24 years old. She's already become one of the faces of women's basketball. Her range is unlimited, she makes passes most players don't even see, and she plays with a competitive edge that's obvious every single possession. If she stays healthy and eventually leads the Indiana Fever to championships, the conversation around her won't just be about potential or upside. We'll be talking about where she ranks among the all-time greats. People often focus on her logo threes and highlight plays, but what actually separates her from other big scorers is her brain. Her basketball IQ is off the charts. You can see it in the way she reads defenses in real time. One possession, she's diagnosing whether the defense is in drop coverage or switching. The next, she's baiting a help defender to step 1 foot too far, then punishing that mistake with a skip pass to the corner. She doesn't just react, she manipulates. Clark processes information incredibly fast. She recognizes rotations, anticipates where defenders will be before they move, and uses that split-second advantage to create shots for herself and her teammates. That processing speed is something coaches rave about and teammates feel immediately. They know that if they cut at the right moment or space properly, she'll find them. On top of that, she's not shy about speaking up. Anyone who has watched her closely, from her college days at Iowa to her time in the WNBA, has seen how comfortable she is talking to referees. She doesn't just complain, she presents her case. She'll walk over, explain why she thought she was fouled, reference the contact, the angle, sometimes even compare it to a previous possession. It's assertive, it's organized, and it has a real "Your Honor, if I may" vibe to it. That lawyer energy isn't something new. Back at Iowa, when she was dominating the college game with the Hawkeyes, her teammate Monica Tsunano picked up a funny nickname, the law firm of Clark and Tsunano. That wasn't just about the way they ran pick and rolls together. It was also a nod to how precise Clark was when she made her case on the court, whether she was breaking down a defense or, again, lobbying her argument to an official. It was tongue-in-cheek, but it stuck because it fit. Fast forward to the pros, and now she's sharing the floor with another franchise cornerstone in Aliyah Boston. The respect between those two is real, and that's exactly what came out during a February 18th episode of the Post Moves podcast, where Boston joined Candace Parker for a fun segment imagining what different WNBA players would be doing if they weren't playing basketball. When Caitlin Clark's name came up, Boston didn't even know where to start at first, because in her mind, Caitlin could do almost anything. She said she could absolutely see Caitlin as a business owner, specifically picturing her owning some sort of golf-related spot. Boston was literally asking out loud if you can own a golf course, then immediately deciding yes, that's what she'd have Caitlin doing, running her own course, in charge, in control, running the operation. Candace Parker jumped in with her own angle and said she could see Clark in a more traditional corporate role too, joking that she could be an accountant. You can picture what she meant. Someone smart, serious, meticulous, maybe in that classic office look, behind a desk working through numbers and details. But Boston wasn't done. She cut in with the career that honestly might fit Clark's personality and playing style the best, a lawyer. And she didn't just throw it out there. She said she'd trust Caitlin as her lawyer. That's a big statement from a teammate who sees her every day, watches how she prepares, how she talks, how she leads. Then they took it a level deeper. When Candace pushed Boston to be more specific and asked what kind of lawyer Caitlin would be, Boston didn't hesitate. In her mind, there was no question. Clark would be a defense attorney. The way Boston described it was hilarious, but also extremely telling. She said she could see Caitlin walking into that courtroom with total confidence, immediately telling everyone, "They're innocent, I'm not playing around," and having people in the room taken aback at first. But then, as the case unfolded, Caitlin would pull
pull out all the facts, all the details, completely backed up and organized, and win everyone over. Boston basically summed it up by saying, "Keep me out of jail, see," because that's how much she'd trust her in that situation. It's a funny moment on a podcast, but think about what that really says. Boston is highlighting Clark's intelligence, her preparation, her ability to persuade, and her belief in her own point of view. Those are exactly the traits that show up in her game. She studies, she notices everything, and she isn't afraid to stand on what she believes and convince others. Even more interesting, when Boston was asked what she herself would be doing off the court in some alternate universe, she also said she could see herself as a lawyer. So you've got the two centerpieces of the Indiana Fever, both imagining themselves in the legal world, both seeing each other as smart, articulate, and capable of handling that kind of pressure. That's not just a cute what-if discussion. That's mutual respect from two young stars building something together. And for Indiana fans, the only court they want to see Caitlin and Aliyah on is the hardwood. If you think about the way the Fever are trying to build for the 2026 WNBA season and beyond, those personalities fit perfectly. This isn't just about talent, it's about having two players who can essentially be the brains of the operation. Boston is an anchor in the paint, someone who sees the floor from the front court, communicates on defense, and organizes things inside. Caitlin is the engine on the perimeter, calling sets, changing tempo, reading matchups. Together, they're dissecting defenses possession by possession. That's why Boston's joke about her being a defense lawyer lands so well. Watch Clark in a late-game situation. She'll come off a ball screen, see a hedge, recognize the low man's position, and either sling a pass cross-court, hit the roller, or pull up herself depending on that one step the defender took. That's evidence gathering and execution in real time. She's cross-examining the defense, exposing weak points, and delivering the final argument in the form of a three-pointer or an assist.
And it's not just offense. The way she communicates, signals to teammates, and talks through what she sees feels like someone constantly building a case. She remembers what a defender did in the first quarter and comes back to exploit it in the fourth. That level of mental detail is rare, especially at her age. Candace Parker's involvement in this conversation adds another interesting layer. Parker is one of the most respected figures in WNBA history, a champion, an MVP, a future Hall of Famer. For her to easily envision Clark in roles like accountant or professional typist says a lot about how composed and mature Caitlin looks, even as a young player. There's a seriousness to how she approaches the game. It doesn't mean she doesn't have fun, but it does mean she treats basketball like a profession, which makes it easy to imagine her thriving in other high-responsibility careers too. At the same time, Boston picturing her as a golf course owner hints at the entrepreneurial side people see in Clark. She's already a massive draw for the WNBA, boosting ratings, attendance, and interest wherever she goes. She understands her brand, handles media responsibilities with poise, and carries herself like someone who's very aware of the business side of sports as well as the competitive side. Put all of that together, and this little "what job would she have" segment ends up telling you a lot about why the Indiana Fever are so excited about their future. You've got a point guard who thinks like a lawyer, prepares like an accountant, and could run her own operation like a CEO. You've got a dominant big in Boston who sees the game with similar intelligence, believes in her teammate's brain as much as her jumper, and imagines herself thriving in that same high-pressure, high-argument profession. For Fever fans, that combination is exactly what you want if you're trying to build a contender. You don't just want talent, you want players who process fast, learn quickly, communicate clearly, and hold each other to a high standard. You want players who see every possession as something to break down, question, and solve. Clark and Boston fit that mold. The law firm of Clark and Seasino might have started as a college joke, but in a way, that theme has followed Caitlin into the WNBA. Now, instead of Seasino, she's paired with Aliyah Boston, and together they're trying to turn the Indiana Fever into a consistent playoff team, and eventually a championship threat. It's not hard to imagine fans and media leaning back into those law firm references if this duo starts really tearing up the league. The funny part is, none of this changes what really matters for them right now. The Fever front office doesn't care how convincing Caitlin would be in a courtroom, they care about how effectively she can run an offense, how well she and Boston continue to build chemistry, and how far that pairing can carry Indiana in the next few seasons. But it does give fans a different way to appreciate just how sharp she is. Because when you strip away the jokes and podcast banter, the core of Boston's praise is simple. Caitlin Clark is incredibly smart. She does her homework, she knows the details, she presents her case on the floor with confidence, and her teammate trusts her so much that even in a hypothetical world, she'd choose Clark to argue on her behalf when everything is on the line. There's something very fitting about that when you look at how much responsibility Caitlyn already carries in real life. She's not just any rookie or young player trying to find her footing. She walked into the WNBA with massive expectations, a spotlight on every move, and the pressure of helping to lift a franchise that has been searching for a return to relevance. She has to handle questions, criticism, and dissecting of every Dame, and she does it with the same steady, composed demeanor that made Boston say, without hesitation, "Yeah, I'd trust her as my lawyer." As fans look toward the 2026 WNBA season and beyond, that partnership between Clark and Boston is going to define the Indiana Fever. If they stay healthy and keep growing, they have a real chance to build something special. The organization will rely on them not just for points and rebounds, but for leadership, communication, and that mental toughness that shows up in film sessions, practices, and playoff-type moments. So yes, it's entertaining to imagine Caitlin Clark owning a golf course, working as an accountant, or walking into a courtroom in a sharp suit. But for Fever fans, the best-case scenario is much simpler. Keep her exactly where she is, on the basketball court, alongside Aliyah Boston, picking apart defenses instead of picking apart legal arguments. Now, I want to hear from you. If Caitlin Clark wasn't in the WNBA, could you see her as a lawyer the way Aliyah Boston described? Do you think defense attorney Caitlin Clark fits her personality and the way she plays? And how high do you think the ceiling is for this Clark-Boston duo in Indiana over the next few seasons? Let me know in the comments. And if you're into detailed WNBA news, Indiana Fever updates, and behind-the-scenes perspectives on players like Caitlin Clark and Aliyah Boston,